Good afternoon, students. Today I'm going to talk about African American science fiction. And so African American science fiction, just like all the other science fiction, very fun to read. So before I start my lecture, I want to show you the books from which I read. So this is an anthology of African American science fiction. Let's see if you can see it better. Yeah, this is an anthology of African American science fiction science fiction stories. And I love the stories in this anthology. So that's one book that I read, and I'll show you all the others. I also read Imago and Dawn. Both are books by Octavia. I'll show you one at a time. Here you have Imago by Octavia Butler, as well as Dawn by Octavia Butler. So Octavia Butler wrote great science fiction, African American science fiction stories. And so without further ado, I'm going to get into the exciting world of African American science fiction stories. So African American science fiction has a long and rich history, dating back to the early 20th century. Some of the earliest African American science fiction writers include Charles W. Chesnutt, W. E. Du Bois, and George S. Schuyler. These writers used science fiction to explore themes of race, racism, and social injustice. In recent years, there has been a resurgence of interest in African American science fiction. This is due in part to the work of writers like N.K. Jemisin, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and Victor LaValle. These writers are using science fiction to explore the complex and often challenging issues facing the African American community. Today, the work of African American science fiction writers is essential reading for anyone interested in the genre. These writers are using their imaginations to create new worlds and new possibilities for the future. They are also using their work to explore important social and political issues. The work of African American science fiction writers is important and timely, and it's sure to inspire readers for years to come. The work of African American writers is essential reading because these writers are using their imaginations to create new worlds and new possibilities. These writers are just a few of the many talented science fiction writers who are working today. So the first book I'm going to cover is going to be called, and I already showed you the book, and it's called Dark Matter. There you go, Dark Matter. The stories in Dark Matter explore a wide range of themes, including race, racism, identity, power, and the future of humanity. The anthology is a valuable resource for anyone interested in African American science fiction. The title of the anthology is a reference to the unseen and unappreciated presence of African Americans in the science fiction genre. Just as Dark Matter is thought to make up most of the mass of the universe, but dark matter is invisible to the naked eye, so too have African American science fiction writers have been largely invisible to the mainstream. Dark Matter is an important anthology because it helps to bring the work of African American science fiction writers to the attention of the general audience. This anthology has been praised by critics and readers alike. It won the 2001 World Fantasy Award for Best Anthology, and it was named a New York Times notable Best Book of the Year. Dark Matter is a groundbreaking anthology that has helped to change the face of science fiction. And so here are a few stories that I really liked. So the Goupert Grapevine by Charles W. Chesnutt tells the story of a white family who buys a plantation in North Carolina. The family is soon plagued by a mysterious vine that seems to be strangling their crops. The family eventually learns that the vine is the work of a former slave who used his magic to curse the crops. The Comet. Oh, this one was definitely my favorite, by W.E. Du Bois. It tells the story of a comet that is about to collide with Earth. The comet is seen as a sign of the end of the world by many people, but Du Bois sees it as an opportunity for a new beginning. He believes that the comet will destroy the old world and create a new world where all people are equal. Okay, so what happens in the Comet? So the Comet is the very first story in the anthology, and it's by W.B. Du Bois. And so what happens is that this comet hits New York, and then the minute the comet hits New York, everybody is dead. So it's like bodies everywhere. Everywhere you look, everywhere you see, not one sign of life. Everyone is dead. And then only two people are left alive. One person had gone to the basement of a big skyscraper to retrieve somebody's file. So this is a black guy, and he went down to retrieve some file in the vaults. So that's why he didn't get killed by the comet. And then another survivor is a really rich lady, and then she's insulated because she's inside her rich apartment, so she doesn't go outside. So both of these survivors are at opposite ends of society, yet they are the only survivors once the comet hits New York City, and then everything and everybody else is obliterated. And so Du Bois makes really good description of all the dead people, of how quiet it is, how everything is so, like, as they say in French, tout est silencieux. And so that it's like an eerie quiet. And so at one point in the story, when the two characters realize they are the only survivors of this comet attack, so they get together and they overcome their racism, and they figure, well, since we're the only two people left on Earth, then we are like Adam and Eve. We are going to repopulate the Earth with new babies, even though we don't like each other and we come from different parts of society, where a black guy in those days, since this was written a long time ago, and so in those days you didn't have a black guy and a white lady having children together. In those days, in Du Bois' time, William Du Bois' time, that kind of interracial marriage would have been illegal. But these two people felt that they were so alone in the world, nobody else there, but just all these dead bodies, that they have to create new life. And then the irony was, just as these two people were just about to have sex and just about to get together in order to have children, then the woman's husband comes crashing through and says, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're alive." And then the black guy's wife, equally, "Oh wow, I'm so glad you're alive." And so as soon as those people showed up, then all of the racial barriers were re-erected, and those two people. But what was funny was that they were willing to give it a try, when they thought they were the only survivors of the comet attack. In that story, it seems that only New York City was obliterated by the comet, but the rest of the world survived. And when you first read the story as the reader, you think that when the comet struck, you have the impression the entire world was obliterated and that only these two people are the only two survivors. So that makes it a gripping story. And as the reader, you cheer them on. You want them to come together and create a whole new human race that's free of racism. Only to be disappointed to find out that, oh no, it was only New York City that got obliterated, and the rest of humanity is still okay, and then therefore, so they never got together, and then that sort of thing. So that was the comet. That was the very first story in the anthology, and I really like that one. Okay, so the other one, and I'll share my screen again. The other stories included I and Gomorrah by Samuel E. Delany. It tells the story of a group of black scientists who travel to Mars to create a new society. The scientists believe that Mars is a place where they can escape racism and discrimination. However, they soon find that Mars is not the utopia they had hoped for. Then Chicago, 1927, by Jewel Gomez. So Gilda is a black vampire. When she takes blood, she does not kill the victim. She leaves the victim a suggestion in their mind to improve her life. So as she's taking the blood, she tells a coward to have courage. She helps people to find inspiration, inner beauty in themselves, and in exchange, she takes a bit of their blood so that she can live. So in 1927, Gilda wanders into Harlem, and there she meets a black bartender named Benny. And then Benny is a glue that holds the entire Harlem African American neighborhood together. Anytime anybody has a problem, they go to Benny. If someone is short on money, they go to Benny. And so Benny keeps everything together. So that bar is a major social place. Then when Benny gets shot, and then the entire neighborhood is devastated. So Gilda sucks Benny's blood and turns him into half a vampire. So he's half vampire and half human. And at some point, Benny will have to decide if he wants to become a full vampire or not. And so in the meantime, he gets to be half human. That means he can still drink and enjoy the foods of, and all that kind of stuff, and continues to be a great bartender throughout his human lifespan. Then at the end of his lifespan, Benny gets to decide if he wants to be with Gilda or just pass away naturally as a human. And then throughout time, what I liked about this story was that you actually have a black vampire. Normally, you have white vampires, that's shown. And so what's interesting about this story is that Gilda, the character, she's got quite the presence. When she walks into the room, everybody notices her. And when she walks down the street, she's not afraid. She doesn't show fear, and that she's the one who rescues. I think there was this one white guy who was trying to, the other ones were trying to mug her, and then there was one guy who said, "No, I don't want to really be here. I don't really want to be there." And so when she took their blood, she gave a suggestion to the white mugger: go back to your wife, give up this life of, don't hang out with those losers, and have your baby, have a good life. In other words, and then he would wake up, forget about his friends, and he goes back to his wife. And so she takes a little bit of his blood, and then and then he goes off. So basically, it's a great story with a sci-fi feel to it, and then you get to see the black female empowerment in there, in which, of course, that doesn't exist in 1927 as much, but you get to see a glimpse of that for the future, where black women have more power, have more say, without having to be a vampire. So Gilda is a great fantasy for that time period in 1927, and also she finally gets to find a partner, because she was very lonely before. She had many human partners, but they always died off, so she always had to leave them. So finally she finds Benny, and the two of them can live in eternity together, on Earth. So basically that's more of a fun African American story, in which you have some black female empowerment. So that's what makes that story interesting. And then Black No More by George Schuyler is another funny story. In this story, Dr. Krugman is able to turn black people into white people in 3 days. And so Max Disher, he's a black man, decides he wants to be turned into a white man, so that he can do whatever he wants, to get rich, go to country clubs, go have sex with a white woman, and lead a happy life free of racism. And so Max Disher in this story becomes so white that even his hair is blonde and white. And so Disher finds out that So he becomes white, and then he goes to these white parties. He starts hanging around with white people. And at first, he had a lot of fun doing whatever he wants. Kind of like a kid in a candy store. He no more racism, no more barriers, and he could do, and he could get that beautiful blonde, But then, of course, the doctor said, but what's going to happen if he has babies? They'll all be mulatto. And then Dr. Krugman says, I don't know, I can't make, but Dr. Krugman, after the baby is born, has the ability to also make the babies white. So that's also part of the science fiction feel of the, and this is part of a novel. This short story is part of a whole novel called Black No More by George Schuyler. So this short story is actually an excerpt from that novel in the anthology Dark Matter. And so here, in the end, Max Disher as the white guy, he thought he would lead a really happy life as a white guy, and then he becomes disappointed to find out that the happiness that the white people had at their parties was only a facade, and that it's not the way you look, it's what you have inside that matters. I believe that's the moral of the story, because Disher decides to go back to his old neighborhood where he used to find authenticity and real friends, but then he gets rejected now that he's all white. And so that basically, I think that the moral of this story is you should think about your inner beauty and not about what's on the outside, something like that. So that was another funny story dealing a little bit with skin color, gender, racism. And so Dark Matters deals with all of these social issues that affect the African American community. And then I also want to go over Octavia Butler's books. So Octavia E. Butler is one of the most celebrated African American science fiction writers. Her work often explores themes of identity, power, and the future of humanity. Butler's most famous novel, Kindred, tells the story of a young black woman who is transported back in time to antebellum Maryland. In Kindred, Butler explores the horrors of slavery and the power of the human spirit. I forgot to go get that book. Yes, I do have that book lying around, and I forgot to get it. So anyway, in that book, the main character Dana, so she's living in present day 1975, and then she gets she somehow gets into a time travel where she goes time traveling back to slavery times, and then she has to save her ancestor or something like that so that she could be born. So it's kind of like a Back to the Future, and then when she travels back in time, for the first time she realizes how horrible slavery was. And then at the end of the book, she travels back to her present day time, and by that time the plantation is 100 years later. The plantation where she had lived, were full of danger, was just, everything was burnt, because that's a long story. You have to read the book to find out. But all that was left is a bunch of ashes and memories and a cemetery. So everything is dead. And so all that's left are the stories left behind that people tell people from one generation to the next. And so she went to the neighborhood surrounding the plantation, and the black people in that area still know about how that plantation burnt down and what happened to its residents. But after having lived through real life slavery, Dana understands the true horrors of slavery, because she traveled through in time from 1975 to 1860 or something like that. So she traveled 100 some odd years. So that's the use of sci-fi to trope of time travel to explore the issue of slavery and the horrors of slavery, and to teach readers the horrors of slavery. And so that's one of her science fiction books. And then Octavia Butler wrote a trilogy. And so in that trilogy, all right, so here, Dawn, so the name of the book is Dawn. That's the first book in the trilogy. So that book I did remember to grab off my bookshelf. And so when Lilith Ayepo awakes from her deep sleep after several hundred years, she finds herself aboard a vast spaceship. Haunted by confused memories of a nuclear war that ravaged Earth, Lilith Ayepo discovers that she is being held by the aliens called Oankali, a seemingly benevolent alien race that intervened right after the nuclear war to save the human race. And so the Oankali rescued the survivors of the nuclear war from their ruined planet, and then placed the human survivors in a coma-like sleep for centuries. Then the Oankali restored the earth so that it would be ready for a habitation. And then the Oankali want Lilith to help awaken the rest of the survivors and rebuild humanity. But the Oankali have needs of their own, and salvation comes at a price. So Dawn is a 1987 science fiction novel by Octavia Butler. It is the first book in the Xenogenesis trilogy. The story is set in a post-apocalyptic future where humans have been nearly wiped out by a nuclear war. The few remaining humans are rescued by the Oankali. The Oankali are a hermaphroditic species that reproduce by genetic exchange. They offer to help the humans rebuild their civilization, but they require humans to interbreed with them in order to do so. The protagonist of the story is Lilith Ayepo, a black woman who was pregnant when the nuclear war happened. She is one of the few humans who are willing to accept the Oankali's offer of interbreeding with them. Lilith learns that the Oankali are not totally benevolent saviors, but rather a species that is driven by a biological imperative to survive and then to breed and to trade with other species. And so the Oankali believes that the only way to ensure their survival is to interbreed with other species and create a new hybrid species. Lilith comes to terms with the Oankali's alien offer. She is afraid of losing her humanity and becoming something she does not recognize. She also fears that the Oankali will not respect human culture or human values. However, she eventually comes to see that the Oankali are not evil. They are simply trying to survive, and they believe that interbreeding with humans is the best way to do that. Dawn is a thought-provoking novel that explores the themes of survival, identity, and the nature of love. It is a powerful story that challenges readers to think about what it means to be human. Here are some additional details about the novel. The Oankali are a tentacled, four-armed species that are neither male nor female. They reproduce by exchanging genetic material with other species. The Oankali believes that all species are equal and that all species have something to offer each other. Lilith is a strong and independent woman who is determined to protect her own humanity. She is also a loving mother who is willing to do whatever it takes to protect her child. Dawn is a powerful story, and it is a story that will stay with you long after you finish reading it. And so Dawn is the first book in the trilogy. The second book is Adulthood Rights. And where is that? That's this book, Adulthood, I don't know if you can see it. There you go. Adulthood Rights. And so Adulthood Rights is the second book in Octavia Butler's trilogy. It is set 10 years after the events of Dawn. And so the Oankali have restored Earth to its former beauty. Humans and Oankali are living together in relative peace. However, there is still tension between the two species, and some humans are still resistant to the idea of interbreeding with the Oankali. The protagonist of the story is Aken, the son of Lilith, Ayepo, and an Oankali male. Aken is a hybrid, and he's struggling to find his place in the world. He is not fully human, but he is not fully Oankali. He is caught between two worlds, and he does not know where he belongs. Aiken is sent to a school for other hybrid children where he learns the Oankali heritage. He also learns about the history of the Oankali and their interactions with other species. As he learns more about Oankali, Aiken begins to understand their motivations. He also begins to understand the importance of interbreeding for the survival of both species. Aiken eventually returns to the human community where he faces prejudice and discrimination. However, he is determined to find a way to bridge the gap between humans and Oankali. He knows that the future of both species depend on it. And so here, Aiken symbolizes someone who could be half black and half white, someone who doesn't belong, someone whom the African American community don't see as totally black, and someone whom the white community does not see as totally white. And then that someone who's half black and half white has to find their own path, their own identity with other people who are also half and half. And so that's the symbolism in Aiken, in which he's half Oankali and half human. Imago is the third and final book of Butler's trilogy. It is set 15 years after Adulthood Rites. The Oankali have continued to rebuild Earth, and humans and Oankali are living in relative peace. The protagonist of the story is Jodas, the daughter of Aiken and an Oankali female. Jodas is a hybrid, and she is the first of her kind to reach adulthood. She is a powerful and intelligent being, and she is destined to play a major role in the future of both species. Jodas faces many challenges as she comes of age. She is discriminated against by some humans, and she is not fully accepted by the Oankali. However, she is determined to find her place in the world. She knows that she has a responsibility to help her people, and she is determined to build a better future for humans and Oankali. And so the Xenogenesis trilogy explores a number of themes, including survival, identity, love, acceptance, prejudice, discrimination, and hope. The trilogy is a powerful and thought-provoking work of science fiction that challenges readers to think about what it means to be human. It is a story about the importance of acceptance, love, and hope for the future. And Joda and Adulthood Rites, both sequels to Dawn, talk about the children of the human survivors and the Oankali and about the future of Earth. I like these stories because it deals with the themes of slavery, racism, and oppression, which are also themes in science fiction. Octavia Butler was a pioneering African-American author who wrote novels that explored themes of race, gender, and identity. Her work is often classified as Afrofuturism, a subgenre of science fiction that explores the intersection of the African diaspora culture with technology and science. And so I will go over Afrofuturism, Sinofuturism, and Techno-Orientalism in a different video where I discuss racism in science fiction. So getting back to Butler. Butler's novels often feature strong female protagonists who are forced to overcome adversity. In her novel Kindred, a young black woman is transported back in time to antebellum Maryland, where she is enslaved. So Kindred explores the horrors of slavery and the resilience of the human spirit. Butler's work is noticeable for its exploration of the intersection of race and technology. In her novel Dawn, humans are forced to interbreed with an alien species in order to survive. So that novel explores the challenges of creating a new society where two different species must learn to live together. So Butler's work is important because it provides a unique perspective on science fiction. Her novels offers a glimpse into the future through the eyes of African Americans, and they challenge readers to think about the ways in which race, gender, and identity will shape the future. Here are some of the themes that Octavia Butler explores in her work. Race. Butler's works often explored the experiences of African Americans in a variety of settings, including the antebellum South, the future, and even other planets. She was particularly interested in the ways in which race shapes identity and experience. Gender. Butler's works explored the experiences of women, particularly Black women. She was interested in the ways in which gender roles are constructed and how they can be challenged. Identity. Butler's work was also concerned with the question of identity. She was interested in the ways in which people create their own identities and how those identities are shaped by their experiences. Technology. Butler was also interested in the ways in which technology can be used to both improve and harm society. She was particularly interested in the ways in which technology can be used to control and oppress people. Hope. Despite the often dark and challenging themes of her work, Butler's writing was always infused with hope. She believed that it was possible to create a better future even in the face of adversity. Butler's work is still relevant today because it continues to challenge readers to think about the ways in which race, gender, and identity shape our world. Her work is also a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a better future. So I hope you enjoyed this video about African American science fiction. So here are the books by Octavia. Here's The Dawn, that's the first book in her trilogy. Then you have Adulthood Rights, which is the second book in the trilogy. And then you have Imago, which is the last book in the trilogy. And then you have Dark Matter, which gives you all kinds of stories about science, African American science fiction. And as you can tell, I love to read, considering how much I've been reading all these weeks, and it's a lot of fun. And it all started out with a research question in which I asked myself, what is science fiction like in other ethnicities and in other countries? And then in doing my literature review, I was reading all of these books, and I was having a lot of fun researching my research question. So research is a lot of fun, and if you have the time, that's the thing, so little time. But that's why I want to tell my writing students that research is fun. If you find the right research question to explore, then research can be like exploration, just like Star Trek explored the universe. So I want to motivate my students to read, because the more you read, the more you explore, the more you know, the more diverse your perspectives become, and the better you write. So if you have any questions, you can always email me. So if you have any questions, you can always email me.